Dave Connis is a former librarian and an author of several young adult novels, including The Temptation of Adam. And his new kids' picture book tells the story of young Eva, who loves to invent, and the God who created her to be a lot like him. It's the inventions of God and Eva. Welcome, Dave. Hey.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
In the book, first of all, we're introduced to young Eva, who has a very inventive mind. Who inspired this book and the character?
So I used to work at a library, you mentioned that, and there was a makerspace that we had. There was a circulation desk. Well, I should say it. I am not a librarian. If I say that I'm a librarian, the actual librarians will pop out of the woodwork and maybe eat me. So I was a librarian's assistant. I did not have a degree. It's very important. So when I was assisting at the library, the circulation desk was very round, and then it was right next to this makerspace. And there was this girl that would come in, at least once a week, and she walked over to the 3D printer all the time, and she had no idea what it was, but she just stared at it multiple times and would just look at it. And then eventually I was like, do you want to know what it is? Can I show you? And then I tried to show her, and then it broke, and it was a very disappointing story. And then it just didn't work, and I was like, well, it prints cool things, so maybe if it's ever working, you can come back. I can't remember if she actually ever got a tour, but that idea of just her coming back over and over and over again to see this thing that she had no idea what it was, but she was just curious about it. That kind of stuck in my head, and then as the STEAM concepts continued to roll, our library even did a STEAM week, or I think maybe it was a STEAM month. I can't remember. It was a STEAM period of time. And, and then I got into tech, and it just kind of kept in there. So here we are.
It was a STEAM theme.
It was a STEAM theme. Yeah.
I thought you were going to say this poor girl, the printer broke, and I felt bad, so I wrote a book about her. I had to make it up somehow. No, that's great.
No, that's a better story. Let's go with that. Yeah.
Well, what I love is this character comes up with these silly names for things. And so I got to ask, did you have any help thinking these up? I know you have 3 kids under 5. So I don't know if they're old enough to help with that, or if that was just you as a dad with young kids getting silly.
Oh, so the story about how this book was written is I was sitting on the toilet. I was not using it, but I was giving the kids a bath. And they were just in prime form and just being absolute chaos and anarchy. And for whatever reason at that moment, I was like, oh, hey, I have an idea for a kid's book. I don't know why.
So our best ideas come to us in the bathroom.
I have this little notebook that I carry around with me. I went and I grabbed it, and I started writing. I had this idea, a line about the versions. And I had this idea, and I started writing it out, and then while I was looking, trying to watch the kids and make sure they didn't jump out like Shamu and splash across the entire house and flood it. I was like, I need some silly words. Somebody give me some silly words. And really, my oldest was at the time the only one that could give me some. Which one did he come up with? My memory is horrible. So he came up with one of them. And then the others we needed to tweak. One of them we came up with was super long. And my editor was like, yeah, that's pretty hard to say. So it was direct help. And one of those carried over.
Love it. What does the book, what does it teach kids about God and why he made them?
Oh, this is my favorite question. So it talks a lot about the concept of being made in the image of God and what that means. And so this one talks about what it means to be made in the image of God and be an inventor. In that, it's a direct correlation, right? God invented, therefore you invented. So the truth is it's not a separate thing. They're not mutually exclusive concepts. It's you are literally reflecting God's image and literally practicing worship and your faith when you create something really cool. And that's actually going to be the theme in our next book too. And it's like one of my favorite themes to think about and talk about, because I think it's the separation of like the sacred and the everyday, or and even, you know, the science and faith. Like it's all one thing. It's all worship, and it's all reflecting God's image.
Yeah, I love that too. I can't remember who the author is, Jonathan. Shoot, but the we're created to create.
Oh, Jonathan Shoot.
Yeah. Yeah, he's the guy. But that's the concept. I agree with you. I love that concept of just like, hey, if we were created by a creator and we're created in his image, then we too are creators. And so I think this book, that's the message. There's actually two things that really drew me to this book. Number one, of course, is the illustrations. And number two is just that idea of encouraging kids to be creative and to be weird and unique and quirky. Can we first just talk about these illustrations, though, by Amy Domingo?
Let's just talk about them for so long.
Yeah.
For the rest of time. She's so freaking talented. And she the one thing that I really liked about her, and I didn't know this when the story about like connecting with her is pretty random too. Like this whole book had a random aspect to it, but like even the story about connecting with her. But I didn't know that she was so detailed. And by detailed, I don't mean like really complicated pictures, but like the small touches, like little things that if you go fast, you don't notice it. But one of my favorite things of reading picture books is when there's the illustration is simple, but there's all this stuff that you can walk through, like, oh, where's the squirrel, or where's the this, or what's the this, or like, because that just like adds to the experience. And as soon as I got the first mocks for her, when we were working on this page, I was like, yes, because it was all of that. It was always like, oh, look at this little detail here. That wrench has a face, or like, look, it's a clock that's made out. It's like also a duck. This is awesome. So yes.
Yeah. She's a true artist, but also so good for kids' books. So I guess the second half of that question, how have you encouraged your own kids to be creative and to invent?
Yeah. So one of the biggest things that I've always wanted my kids to have is a sense of curiosity. And some of that is just hard won. Like I want to be curious continually. Therefore, I want them to also be curious. And in some ways, it's been like they've helped me be curious, and I've helped them. And I think in some, like, they've probably helped me more than I've helped them. But there's this concept of with kids, everything's like, let's go, let's like move really fast. Except when it's like, oh hey, that like lizard doesn't have a tail, and then it's just like, oh, let's all look at the lizard without a tail. And as a parent, if you're going somewhere. I think you talked about this with JJ Heller in her interview, but as a parent, like there's always a lot of times where you're like, hey, we got to get some groceries, or like it's almost 1:00 and people are going to be melting down in about like 45 seconds. So you're like constantly trying to manage like this time. And while I think that like there is value in managing the time, there is also value in the ability to like slow down and just like appreciate that there's a lizard without a tail. And then like not just say like, oh yeah, that's cool, but like, whoa, this lizard doesn't have a tail. How did it lose its tail? And to kind of like show your wonder alongside of their wonder. And I think there's something too, like I've been thinking about, I think it's Psalms 34:8, where it says, taste and see that the Lord is good. You have to taste, like the taste comes before the seeing, right? Mm-hmm. So you have to, in order to taste, you have to like choose to do it. Like I can confirm that you can eat food without tasting it, because I do it with breakfast all the time because we got to get people to school and stuff like that. So like there's this, even in the like the experiencing of the goodness of God, like there is a choice there. So I think there's always a choice that you have to slow down enough and say like, oh, I'm going to taste this. I'm going to taste and see. Yeah. So I think that's a big. whole thing.
You may have, this actually may have already answered, you may have answered this question already, but I know that you're also a musician. So maybe just as we wrap up, if you could quickly speak from your experience here, and even, like you said, already you've sort of mentioned this, but is there a message that you want adult listeners to hear when it comes to creativity and their creator?
Yeah, it's like, it's cool. It's fine. They can be creative. Like, it's all one thing. Like, creativity is a whole part of how Christians experience the world, and even the calling of being in it. I think there's been a lot of times where it's almost felt optional or like not a good ROI to be creative, return on investment. And I'm sure there's people that agree with that don't believe that, but I think, like, for me and where I'm coming from, I've seen so much life come out of creativity, and I've also seen I've just seen a lot of Jesus and a lot of God, like, in my own creative endeavors, and watching him work through that and work through me and give joy to other people. And I think that's really important. I think we have to wrestle with that. We have to wrestle with this idea that we, what did you say earlier while we were talking? I think because our God is because God is a creator and we are made in his image, we are also creators. So I think there's something huge there that needs to be worked out.
Yeah. Wow. So good. Well, I mean, it's a good encouragement for adults, but of course for kids, just helping them understand that they are created to create and that they can invent because they were invented by a perfect God. So it's Dave Connis, the book again, The Inventions of God and Eva. Yay. I can't wait for the next one, Dave. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay, I had another question that I didn't get to, but that's okay. It was probably more of the same stuff, to be honest. But I love that spread in the book that had the Eva thinks the early versions of her inventions lack dazzle, oomph, and pizzazz. So I was going to ask you to explain that part and like kind of what you're trying to convey here. But I think it's a lot of the same. But I think, there's another component there that I think is a great message for kids.
Yeah, it's that idea. I mean, you can take it two ways, right? Like, one way is that it's we think that the things that we create, we get frustrated with those, and like we're always trying to like make things better and improve and stuff like that. And I think that's like an important thing. I don't think that's a bad thing. But in relation to how God views the works in progress, specifically like with God viewing Eva as one of his creations and putting the two together, like Eva is, and I was worried about that in some ways of like portraying like being frustrated as like a completely negative thing, because I think that creates innovation, right? Like you have to like bump up against like your own limits in order to move forward. But I think when it comes to God, like seeing like it doesn't matter what version you are still loved. And that's just like something that I really want to believe myself.
Yeah.
So it's something that when I was thinking around that scene and thinking around like what would it look like, it just really spoke to me, and like putting those things together and showing those differences as like the experience of a human, and then the experience of like omnipotent, like somebody who just like has created the world and is just so enamored. It doesn't matter like at what stage you're in.
Well, it's funny because I draw this parallel a lot when I think of art, and this is a perfect example. Reading this, and you're thinking of that saying that's like an artist's work is never truly finished, and like I mean, as a songwriter, and just and it's like you just want to keep coming back and just add those little touches. And I'm wondering, like, is that a parallel to how God is, where he wants us to improve, or like you said, or is like, no, God's work is finished. You are the way he's like, I don't know. I've kind of been kind of theorizing what that might look like.
Good question. I mean, like, there's obviously an ideal that was in Eden, right? Like, we started off in a spot. I mean, and I've gotten in trouble for talking around this, so it's probably a better way not to like extrapolate on air. But like the thing that I've thought about is that Eden, while it was perfection, it was the start of something. Right? Like it was the start of an experiment with God inviting us into like creation and doing that with him. Like there was somewhere we were going there. It wasn't just that it was perfect and it was done. We were being asked to work in that. Like Adam was given jobs, and like if there really was if it really was perfect, or there really was like just utopia, then why are we working? What are we working towards? So I think Genesis 1 and 2, it has that sense of like we're starting this experiment together, and we're starting this kingdom, like co-ruling it together. And of course we all know what happened, but like I think it's the same sense of the now and not yet. Like we're redeemed, and we are loved, and we have the Spirit in us, which in some senses is like almost a return to Eden. I've been thinking a lot about that.
And even what you just said, that co-creating thing, if we're doing this together with God and then all of a sudden we fail and the fall of Adam and Eve, and then all of a sudden it's like, oh, I should stop creating. And it's like, I think that's sort of like, it's better if I don't, I'm just going to mess it up. And it's sort of what we've talked about the book. And then even at the end, talking about adults losing that sense of creativity. I think we do have all those things that kind of narrow us in, and we go like, no, it's not good to mess up. Let's just let somebody who's good at it do it, or whatever, right?
Yeah. And I think that, and it gets more transactional, right? Like as time goes on, I've never heard a kid say, time is money. Like there's no child saying that. And
hey, honey, draw me a picture. What do you give me for it? Yeah.
But like you get this you end up with this transactional, and it's probably because you end up in 9-to-5s and stuff like that. And in some ways, like it's unavoidable in order to eat food. Like you do have to trade your time in some ways. So I think that just gets normalized. And then suddenly you're up against the fracturing of your time as it relates to money and like all of this other stuff. And I think it just gets really hard to pop out of that and to see like the benefits of the slowing down and the
creating just for the sake of creating.
Just like making something and creating. So I think it's definitely a hard thing, and I can see like I don't think culture is setting us up for being for just doing that sort of thing and slowing down.
Really,
and in some ways there's benefits to like that, and in other ways I think you just lose a lot of that. And it's not even wonder, like it's just because I think everybody has some sense of wonder in them. It's just like what habits have you gotten into when you approach that thing? So yeah,
gotta get on Pinterest more. No, I'm just kidding. More Pinterest.
Wow. So Instagram does that for me. It really does. I know a lot of people don't like it, and for fair reasons, but I think that's how I found Amy. I was on Instagram. I was literally just scrolling through, what was I going through? I think it was like children's book illustrators.
Yeah.
And I just saw her, she does these like adorable little depictions of their kids, but they are in response to like scripture, like specific scriptures.
Oh, neat. Okay, yeah.
And she draws them all out, and they're just like so freaking adorable. And I had the idea of doing a Jesus-y kids book for a while, and I was like, oh, maybe I should message her.
That's cool.
And I did, and then basically I was just like, hey, I don't know if this is gonna work. I'm a young adult author, and my agent, like, he doesn't represent young adult or picture books. So we'll have to find a new one, and I honestly don't know, like, the market for picture book agents who represent Jesus-specific picture books that are also funny is very narrow.
I'm sure.
Like, it's very small.
Yeah.
I found 2 people, maybe. And luckily, the first one we approached, it worked out, but...
And
Yeah,
usually
it was all-
they pick your illustrator too, so it's cool that you actually were
Right.
able to. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the whole thing, the whole thing is a very God thing where it was like, I had this random idea like in my head
In
when
your
I was
bathroom.
giving the kids a bath,
Yeah.
wrote it down, and then randomly was scrolling through Instagram and found Amy. And then I was like, I really don't know if this is going to work. Do you want to do it? Yeah, I would love to try it. And then I was like, okay, well, now we have two people that, like, if they say no, I don't know what to do. So, and then the first one said yes. And then, it's just
Yeah.
God's really seen all of that through. So I'm really excited.
Yeah, cool. Well, it's definitely a theme that I haven't seen a lot of, and I do a lot of kids books. I try to do youth and young adults also, but it seems like so far this season it's all picture kids books, but they're so good and there's a lot of unique messages out there that I'm like, okay, well, we haven't done one on that yet. Like it's not just Bible story books, there used to be so many Bible story books. So I love the theme of this one, and hopefully just having this conversation will also, like we've sort of touched on, inspire adults to keep that creativity too, because I think we do lose it as we grow up. So
Please.
yay. Well, thank you so much. It's been so great to chat with you.
Yeah, this has been so much fun. Thank you.